we will look at this very thorny subject of the private armed security teams on board ships, and then I'll give you some thoughts just to stimulate discussion on what we think is a good way ahead in this very difficult problem. But first of all, something of where I'm coming from. Our Piracy Reporting Center was set up in 1991, 20 years ago, and is still the only 24-hour manned center which receives reports of attacks from the front line of the incidents, that is from the shipmasters at the time of the attack or shortly after that. So it is probably the best evidence of the attack, the first evidence of the attack that you get. And as soon as we receive it, we pass it immediately to the response agencies, the police, the Coast Guard, the navies, and in the case of the problems of Somalia, to the naval coordination centers which are there around the world dealing with this problem. As a result of this, we get a lot of information coming into the Piracy Reporting Center regarding trends. We analyze it, and we will send out a broadcast to ships all over the world, telling them where the recent attacks have taken place in the areas that the masters are transiting through. So it becomes an invaluable guide to the masters as they go through these difficult areas. We put these attacks together. When we detect a particular trend, we will write to the country concerned, and we will ask them to allocate resources to deal with the problem. It's important to remember one thing, that piracy is often a crime which takes place against a foreign ship carrying a foreign cargo, which with a foreign crew on board, which just inconveniently happens to be going through national waters. And in many places where piracy is a problem, where law enforcement resources are limited, the cases of piracy become a nuisance for the public prosecutor and others to prosecute. It is an expensive exercise, it takes a lot of resources, and it is not something which wins votes at the end of the day. So unless we raise the profile of piracy, inform the governments, we are not going to get the response back from them in order to deal with this. And it is very important, therefore, that the reports are made to the Piracy Reporting Center. We are often the first people to raise the alarm. We were, in the case of Somalia back in 2007, the first people to raise the alarm of what was happening in these waters. It is otherwise a forgotten problem, something that we should always remember. I'll come back to this theme a little later on. We then send reports, quarterly reports from the Piracy Reporting Center to the United Nations, to the IMO and other bodies, to governments, to policy makers in business and in government, so that they can be aware of what is happening around the world. And it becomes, as a result of these reports which are picked up by the press, they talk about it, governments and others are forced to acknowledge that there is a problem in their waters. And then they give the resources to the Coast Guard, to the navies, to the police to deal with it. And then begins the chain of response. So collecting the information is also very important. We think that the information should come from a non-governmental center such as the IMB, because we are not subject to Official Secrets Act or any other restrictions on the information that we put out. Everything that comes to us immediately goes out to the people who have to deal with it. And for those who are in government, they know that there are, for very good reasons, restrictions on what they can receive the information, but there are restrictions on what they can put out to the world outside, for very good reasons. So for that reason, a non-governmental Piracy Reporting Center is vital. And it has resulted in the reduction of piracy attacks in places like the South China Seas, the Gulf of Tonkin, the Malacca Straits. We were one of the agencies which were involved in that. There were other reasons why that came down, one of which was the fact that Lloyd's of London threatened to increase the insurance premiums for vessels going through those waters at that time. And that was the catalyst for the response, which we now has been very successful in the Malacca Straits and in various other parts of the world. So all our reports are free of cost. Everything that we do has no charge at all to the ship owners, to the masters, whenever they need it. Now, where does it take place? If you go to our website, we have a live piracy map, and this is a little snapshot of it. In 2012, you can see that already we are now just 2 months into 2012, and you can see the number of attacks which are taking place around the world. The three key areas, starting with the least serious one, is in Southeast Asia. Then you have the attacks which are taking place in the Gulf of Guinea on the west coast of Africa, around the coasts of Nigeria, Benin, and Togo. And then, of course, you have this really challenging problem of piracy off the coast of Somalia. I'll try and deal very quickly with the first two and then spend the rest of my time looking at the problems of the east coast of Africa. So far, in 2012, 64 attacks, 6 vessels have been hijacked, 101 crew taken hostage, and 2 crew have been killed. I'll tell you that in today's world, this is not acceptable. What is important to remember is that merchant seafarers do not sign on board a merchant ship to put themselves in the front line to face rocket-propelled grenades or automatic weapon fire from criminals and pirates, or to find themselves sitting on board a ship in Somalia for 7 to 8 months at a time, completely cut off from the rest of the world, under control of young, irresponsible Somalis who are on drugs and have got a weapon in their hand. This is not the reason why seafarers, merchant seafarers, go out to sea. So it is a very serious problem which needs our attention. So a quick look at the statistics, and you can see now how the attacks have gone on since 2003. In 2009, 10, and 11, we have seen a real peak in the number of attacks, all exceeding 400 attacks a year. And this year, of course, so far we have had 64. The hijackings, the vessels which have been hijacked correspond to the attacks, the trend with the attacks. And last year, 45 vessels hijacked and over 800 crew taken hostage. The different phases. So when we look at piracy generally, we are looking for I'm sure that this question will arise from the audience, the issue of definitions. When I speak about piracy, I'm talking about the phrase piracy and armed robbery. Piracy as defined under Article 101 of UNCLOS, and armed robbery as defined by the IMO in their circulars. So that is what I define. So with this phrase, piracy and armed robbery, it includes all the attacks which takes place upon the high seas. It includes the attacks which takes place within territorial waters. And remember, why are we addressing this problem? It is because of the seafarer, the captain on board a ship and his crew, who suddenly finds himself woken up in the middle of the night, and he is completely under the control of these people who have exercised sometimes very serious, whether it has taken place in an anchorage inside the territorial waters of a country. The risk to him is exactly the same. And that is why it is not to be used as an excuse not to deal with the attacks against the ships, wherever they take place. So the different phases of the attackers, like this one, a robber who has been caught on board a ship and now awaiting transport to the nearest police station ashore, to a gang of guys who stole vessels. I think one of our speakers later on will be talking about this very specific case, who hijack a ship in order to steal the ship and its cargo. To the issues of West Africa, which is driven by an insurgency movement there against the exploitation, as they see it, of the oil resources in the rivers and delta states of Nigeria. And finally, to the issues of the Somali pirates who have suddenly found a financial model where they can get hold of a ship, hold the crew, and they know that for that crew they can get millions of dollars in ransom if they hold it long enough. So we have a range of the kind of attacks. They're after money, they're after stores, equipment that they can steal very quickly, they're after the cargoes which can be stolen from a ship, and the insurgency, and of course they are after the ships themselves of Somalia. And the outcome is violence against the crew, who are always the victims in this particular case. Some of these attacks may not be very serious. They may be the armed robbery attacks, but they take place in congested waters, often when a ship is underway. And for the duration of the attack, which may be 40 minutes to an hour, the vessel is not under its lawful command, because the captain and the people on the bridge are tied up or they are beaten up and they are unable to navigate the vessel properly. The ship is on autopilot. And it is quite possible that it could become the subject of a maritime casualty, a collision, a grounding, with all the environmental consequences that can flow from it. And finally, of course, the ultimate sanction. So now let's look at the first area, which is really the least one of our major concerns, Southeast Asia. And here we have had in the last, in 2012, 17 incidents with 14 vessels being boarded. The purpose of